everyone, I'm Rishi and welcome back to Racing Weekly, a podcast and YouTube show brought to you by oddschecker in association with Bet365. A lot to look forward to, obviously, in the week of one of the greatest events in sport, the Randox Grand National. And of course, we'll be reflecting on some of the good racing that we've seen, both domestically, in Ireland as well. And we'll have a couple of very special guests who have a very big week ahead of them at Aintree. But now it's time to say hello to my partner in crime, Sam Turner. Sam, I haven't seen you for a couple of weeks. How have you been?
You've been busy, Rish, as usual, flying from here, there and everywhere. Yeah, I've been in good form, thank you. Enjoyed the Easter programme. Good mix of flat and jumping. Sneaked a 1-0 Wolves win in there as well over the weekend, which was quite remarkable scenes. And yeah, all good. Looking forward to this week. The build-up to this week's fantastic, isn't it? We had a nice little, when the Irish went, thank you for saying that, but we had a lovely aperitif for the Irish Grand National on Monday, which produced an absolutely stunning result and stunning ride. More of that later. But also, obviously, building up now to the Randox Grand National, and then obviously the Scottish National the week after. So we're in a period of fabulous racing.
It is indeed. You'll be up at Aintree?
Yeah. Hope to be there all 3 days if the liver remains intact.
Well, I look forward to seeing you up there, but let's focus our attention on this week's racing recap. And we start this week with action in Ireland. Sam, you've already alluded to what took place over the weekend, and there was some very good racing, obviously, but I think you've sort of suggested that the highlight of the week or the weekend was the riding performance of Paul Townend in the big race, the Irish Grand National on Monday.
Yeah, I don't always think Paul gets the credit he deserves, really, for the way that he rides through races. Yes, he got plenty of plaudits for Galopin des Champs in the Cheltenham Gold Cup, but a number of times people would just say, oh, yeah, when he was riding one of Willie's, it was a steering job, a stick-on job, and he didn't really have to do much other than navigate his passage round. But on I Am Maximus, I mean, I know there was plenty of people eulogising about the ride afterwards, but it's only when I went back and watched it for a second time, because obviously a lot's happening in an Irish National. You've got 30 runners, and it's mayhem pretty much throughout. And you go back and actually dissect the ride, it was pretty astonishing how he's actually managed to get the horse round, let alone get into a position of contention at the last and then go on and win as well as he did. Obviously, I Am Maximus, a horse that pretty much showed no interest for the first circuit. I don't think he had a horse behind him passing the winning post after a circuit. Finally managed to warm to his task a little bit, stopped jumping so markedly left, which was sort of a problem that he had through that first circuit and stopped him from getting into contention. Paul then let him sort of pick his way through runners and fallers and one or two pull-ups, and then finally just warmed to his task and came back on the bridle, really, down the back straight and managed to launch a bid for glory. But it was a pretty astonishing ride, really.
It was an astonishing ride, an astonishing performance from the horse as well, considering, obviously he was a former Nicky Henderson horse. He went to Willie Mullins. He's been a project. I think Johnny Ward was on Racing Weekly at one point during the season that's just gone and said that he was going to load up on I Am Maximus at slightly odds on when he ran at Christmas time. And he hasn't been the most straightforward horse. So take into account some performance.
Did think at the time that was Johnny at his bravest. I've got to be honest. He has often been a horse that you could accuse of being a bit of a thinker, and I think it might have made a man of him. Whether he managed to win again and get the perfect setup and the perfect ride as he did there, obviously Paul Townend on the high of the way that Willie's horses ran over the weekend, and of course obviously the Clasutton horses being in rude health again and dominating the Irish Easter Festival like they did. Just quite extraordinary results from that yard, and probably more incoming this week up on Merseyside. But it was a phenomenal ride, just brilliant horsemanship. And having just been 3 or 4 weeks ago where Paul was the subject of a fair bit of criticism here and there, from the Dublin Racing Festival, and then that sort of moved its way into Cheltenham occasionally. To answer his critics and have the strength of mind to ride that race and ride the way he did over the weekend was phenomenal.
Yeah, he's pretty nonplussed as a character. Nothing faze him, despite what people may say in and around him. Let's talk about some of the other performances at Fairyhouse over the weekend. I mean, there's loads to go about. Most of them obviously trained by Willie Mullins and ridden by Paul Townend. One or two ridden by Danny Mullins as well. Anything that you'd like to kick off with? Anything that really struck you over the weekend?
Well, I think the one thing that struck me over the weekend was how a lot of the Cheltenham horses struggled a little bit to repeat their form or even go one better or two better from what they managed at Prestbury Park. Obviously, I Am Maximus was a glaring outlier for that stat. But I just thought that one or two horses, like the Blood Destinies of this world, obviously it was really sad to lose Mighty Potter as well. That was a terrible note to take from the weekend. But there was just a few that you just thought they looked a little bit flat, and they didn't quite reproduce what we'd seen at Cheltenham, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And that just might be something to bear in mind going into Aintree. I know we've had a sustained or a longer period between the two meetings and between the two festivals, but getting a horse to pick for Cheltenham and take on the Irish battalions, and then asking them to rock up 4 weeks later at Aintree and do the same, that could be a tough assignment for one or two horses this week.
Yeah, that's a very good point to make. Obviously, there's a little bit more of a gap before we get to Aintree, extra week or so. The one race I wanted to particularly mention with the future in mind was the 2.5 mile hurdle that took place on Monday, where Asterion Phalange won. But a big talking point was the return of the mighty Monkfish, who at one point was similarly rated in terms of where he could go to, say, Galopin de Champs as a novice. But he's had his issues. He's been off the track for a very long time. Were you encouraged by what you saw from Monkfish?
Yeah, it's an interesting commentary as well. I don't know whether you caught the commentary, but there was an interesting slip of the tongue from the Irish commentator there. But yeah, Asterion Phalange, nice to see the old boy back and winning a race, isn't it? It's been a long time between drinks, really. But typical Willie Mullins finds a solution to the problem, and just a really eye-catching performance from Monkfish. Really, he was ridden very considerately, I think, with a view to obviously the Gold Cup at Punchestown, which seems to fit in really nicely. A lot of trainers probably would have pulled stumps this year and thought, well, there's little or no point trying to get him ready for one race. But I suppose he's been so fragile in recent times. There's no point trying to make grand plans for next year. While he's fit and well at this present time, it's best to press on, and that's what they've done. And hopefully he come out of that race okay behind Asterion Phalange. He's only beaten half a length. He's quite strong in the market as well, which I thought was interesting for a horse that had such a period off the track. The fact that he held his position price-wise usually tells you a lot with the Mullins runners, and he ran accordingly. He ran a very prominent and bold race, and hopefully he can build on that, and we'll see him at Punchestown.
Well, I think I'll close off what happened in Ireland, and I'm going to afraid close it off with sad and disappointing news over the weekend. One of the worst stories of the weekend was the fatal fall of Mighty Potter in the big Grade 1. Willie Mullins obviously had the first 6 in that race, but the race and the weekend marred by that fall of Mighty Potter. We send our condolences to all his connections. Looking on the domestic front, Sam, there was some good over obstacles, the likes of Agagio winning up at a Haydog. What a story that has been. But there was also a lot of good racing on the flat as well. I imagine there was quite a bit for you to dissect and decipher from the weekend.
Yeah, there was a fair bit to go at, wasn't there? I think we should just pay great tribute to Adam Nicol, who won the big race up at Musselburgh with Wise Eagle. I think that's the 11th race he's won under both codes for Adam, who's obviously not a fledgling trainer. He's been around the block a while, but not, he's still in the formative stages of an impressive career. And he was sort of picked up cheap, I should imagine, from Tom Clover's yard. His career looked to be stalling or not really yielding any promise. Started off life in bumpers, I think, and then has just gone through the grades and sort of won at the weekend of just short of 100. They can have some really exciting days out now with him, and I thought it was a really strong performance. Just held off Metier, who ran an absolute blinder for Harry Fry, and obviously I think it was a November handicap winner as well. So the form looks very strong. Pleasant Man, tried to lead out for Paul Nicholls and Kevin Stott. He ran creditably, but I thought it was a really, really lovely story that Wise Glory is going to be booking some some nice trips, I should imagine, this summer. Chester Cups would be on the agenda in the short term, and then you would think, Royal Ascot and places like that, you would think.
Yeah, Jenny Durrance, his other half, was saying, I think they've only got about 9 horses. So to have had a winner of that profile meant a lot to the team. There's a possibility, Sam, that the King might have a classic contender, could potentially coincide with the coronation, a horse at Kempton.
Yeah, incredible slip of the pen. We certainly wrote another chapter for the Royal Horses. No, I thought it was a really smooth performance, showed signs of inexperience. I thought he was given a beautiful ride from James Dore, just sort of nursed to the front, and didn't really do anything extravagant, but just lengthened the quick and nicely. I think he probably just had a little bit of a look around when he hit the front. Obviously he'd won at Kempton. He hasn't been away from there yet. He's 2 from 2 at that track, but he just looks a really, really nice horse. He's a Knight of Thunder as well, so no surprise to see him shift a little bit left when he hit the front, but he looks to have loads of class and pace. I get the feeling that he's probably still learning on the job, and you trust the Gosden team to know what's best for him. So I think talks of a Guineas might be a little bit premature, but give him a little bit more time and perhaps one more run under the belt. St James's Palace Stakes, those sort of races at Ascot. I mean, that would be a fabulous story this summer, wouldn't it?
A royal runner, yes. That would be something for slip of the pen, but he definitely looks an exciting horse, and he will be managed beautifully as the norm by the Gosden team, who also unleashed Laurel for her first run of the season. She was very impressive in a short space of time last season, despite being keen and sort of sat out wide through the majority of the race. I thought she was really good. Yeah,
I did as well. Probably not the premium sort of speed figure performance of the day at Kempton. That nearly went the way of slip of the pen. But I was just really taken with the way that she lengthened. Kingman filly, she got loads of class and style. And yes, I think she's still learning on the job a little bit. That was just her 4th start. I think she can improve again. I think she's sort of into 5 or 6 to 1 for a lock hinge on the back of that. She's got a long raking stride as well, hasn't she? I was really, really taken with the way that she galloped out at Kempton. I know 1 or 2 people have put a bit of a question mark by the form, but Sound Angela's a progressive filly that's going the right way. I just think Laurel's looks as though she's got the scope to really take a 4-year-old campaign in a stride, really. And yeah, she's very much one, with Inspiral being a little bit in and out for the yard, in recent times, and not being able to reproduce consistent performances perhaps at the highest level, then perhaps Laurel would be the type of horse that'd be a brilliant backup, and certainly they're going to win some classy races with her this year. I was very taken with that performance.
Just finally mention, if it's all right, on the flat, all-weather finals day at Newcastle, Andrew Balding, Oisin Murphy. It seems as if Oisin Murphy has just slipped right back into the groove. Any rustiness whatsoever. And the Balding team, which we know continues to grow and strengthen, they are certainly flexing their muscles impressively at this time of the season.
They very much are. Yeah, obviously Desert Cop winning in those great silks, and winning nicely in the 3-year-old condition stakes. I thought that was a really good performance. Very professional from him. They also ran a horse at Wolverhampton as well over the weekend called Old Harrovian. 1 or 2 of our press room colleagues might have been back in that, I should imagine, especially the Etonians. They'd have been laying it. But yeah, he looks a really, really tidy horse, big bull of a horse, and put up a sensational speed figure when he won the second race in about a week or 10 days. Quite where they go with him, I don't know. But yeah, that was that all-weather championships day at Newcastle. I can't make up my mind whether it's a success or a failure at the moment. Lingfield have moved on, haven't they? I thought they put on a really good card, and they got packed stands, etc., etc. So they don't seem to have suffered with it. I just wonder whether Newcastle is the right place for that meeting. I don't know about your thoughts, but I just find the racing it's just a little bit dull there. I just Lingfield, there was always things happening. There was a bit of drama. You get horses that are really quick, and Newcastle, I don't know whether it's the configuration of the track, it's just that long straight and that long climb to the line. It just all feels a little bit, meh for me.
I'm with you. I'd prefer the all-weather finals to finish at Lingfield. I think that the nature of the course lent itself to more exciting racing.
Mm.
And I think the way races are generally run at Newcastle, the way the races, they spread themselves out, you kind of find only a handful of horses in contention from a long way out. Whereas at Lingfield, you have the drama of it's sort of pace dependent, whether the last or whether the pace collapses and something comes flashing down the outside. Got far more, well, not far more, but you certainly got a few international challengers from France. Not seeing many of those up at Newcastle. I think it's something that they perhaps could do with a little rethink.
Yeah, and like you say, you don't get the Irish horse. Well, you don't get the Irish horses over in number. Yeah, I know Joseph O'Brien was represented with San Andreas, but the French, where the French horse has gone, it's just a bit disappointing. It just feels, and I think the problem is that Newcastle raced so often. That did Lingfield, admittedly, but that there felt a little bit of a sense of occasion when it first came out, the All-Weather Finals Day. We're building up to it, and you had some good quality horses running. Now I understand there's law. The other side of the world now, not only have we got Saudi, but obviously Meydan and various other places that these horses can go and compete in. And that's why we get smaller fields for the Easter Classic and races like that. And I totally understand that. But I think that All-Weather Finals Day was pitched to try and keep, good quality horses from A, being sold to Australia or wherever around the world, and B, to try and stop them almost from running and having Meydan as their primary objective through the early part of the year. And I'm not sure it's working at the moment. I think we just, and certainly shifting it to Newcastle, I think it's great to spread the wealth, and I think it's great to give the North a big meeting such as that, rather than having it all centred down in the South. I just don't think that one has particularly worked very well.
Yeah, something to reconsider. Okay, let's wrap up racing recap now and look ahead to what we've got coming up this weekend, particularly at Aintree. Okay, so Aintree, the focus of attention for most people in Britain, and in fairness, the Grand National is a huge race worldwide. We'll come to the Grand National in just a moment, Sam, but all the way through the week, from Thursday through to Saturday, we've got some terrific supporting races. And Thursday in particular could be a belter. There's the Aintree Bowl. There's a bit of speculation about whether Brave Man's Game is going to run or not. Obviously, news broke last week that John Dance, the part owner of Brave Man's Game, or he has been leading up to this point, his company, Vertum, part of Wealth Tech, ceased or asked to cease trading by the Financial Conduct Authority. So that's a separate issue, which may affect his participation or not. But were he to run, the Aintree Bowl could be something spectacular.
Yeah, I think the sort of vibe is at the moment, and this could be why the mark by the time we're published, but is that Brave Man's Game will be allowed to run, but he'll have to run in the sole ownership of Brian Drew, his part owner prior to the problems that have beset Furton Futurity Group. So fingers crossed Brave Man's Game can run. I should imagine Paul Nicholls would be pulling his hair out if he couldn't, because he's obviously come out of Cheltenham pretty well if you read the reports. Great to have him in the race, and great to have what looks really select field. So with Brave Man's Game running, I think I'm going to have to stick with him. I mean, that Gold Cup time was phenomenal. Rishi, the final circuit as well was 10 or 15 lengths quicker than Pervious managed to win the mares race in. It just shows you how quick they were trapping in that final circuit. So hopefully Brave Man's Game doesn't repeat his performance of 12 months ago at Aintree, where he looked completely fried after about half a furlong. And he can come out and produce what we saw at Cheltenham, the way he jumped and travelled through that race. And he was just beaten by a beast of a horse. So I'm going to give him a chance to round the season off well and nudge Paul Nicholls towards that £4 million prize money mark. Yeah,
I'm worried that he may have come out of the race really well, but it was such a hard race. The Gold Cup dragged it out of all of them. If he can bounce back just weeks after a race like that and win, then hats off to him. I'm not sure what I want to back in the race at the moment. If I'd say Shishkin, and I know that people might say he had a harsh. I feel like he was saving something through that race, whatever reason. So I'm hoping that he might put it all in come the Aintree Bowl. Obviously, Constitution Hill runs at the Aintree Hurdle.
Yeah, he's very difficult to oppose. Obviously, well, virtually impossible to oppose. Was he 5 on, 4 on, something like that? There are some strange things happen at Aintree towards the tail end of the year, but you'd be gutted if something like happened to a Constitution Hill. I mean, he hurdles smoothly, travels beautifully, and stepping up to 2.5 is no issue at all. Hopefully there's a bit of a better performance from I Like to Move It. I couldn't quite understand the race tactics in the Champion, trying to take on Constitution Hill at the head of affairs. You're always going to pay for that late on. Maybe a flat track 2.5 and just dropped in, and he might jump a little bit better on better ground.
Where is John Bond going to run?
Well, I'm told he runs on Saturday over 2, which is a little bit of a surprise. I think St. Wa is going to be the JP
in the 2.5 mile.
The JP runner in the 2.5 miler that gets the meeting underway. So I think the likes of him, Banbridge, Stage Star are going to go for that race, I think, and John Bonds could be safe for the Saturday.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about the Marsh Chase as well, Sam. That could be a terrific race. Fakir Dudury, who's got an outstanding record in the race anyway. Joseph O'Brien actually does pretty well at this particular meeting. 2-1 joint favourite with Pic Dory. How do you see that?
Yeah, obviously Pic Dory, this is his sort of ballpark, really. Flat track, 2.5, spring ground. You can certainly see a big run coming from him. But I think if rumour reaches me correctly, Fakir Dudury's back in rude health. Just didn't fire for whatever reason at Ascot. He was pretty wide throughout that day, came back a little bit quiet and etc. etc. But we're going to allow him a blip. He's got a bit of sun on his back now. Temperatures have warmed up a little bit, thankfully. Back to Aintree as well, one of his favourite stomping grounds. He's fresh as paint at home, I'm told. So fingers crossed for Fakir Dudury, and he can bounce back and complete the hat-trick. Well,
we're both tipping favourites in that race because I like Pic Dory. I thought it was a terrific run. And obviously he had Fakir Dudury behind him.
Yeah.
That's good. 7 lengths, I think he's got to make up on it. Okay. Anything else? Let's see what else. The Liverpool Hurdle could be quite interesting. Marie's Rock, if she turns up.
Yeah, I was really disappointed with her at Cheltenham. She was down the I don't think the run of the race was particularly suiting her that day, and she's obviously a lot better than that. But it was still a disappointing effort, even given the sluggish, slow pace. And they're probably kicking themselves, thinking they should have run in the Staters. But I'm not convinced she would have won that the way that panned out. Tupu obviously stepping back in trip. We've got Flooring Porter in there again. The one which is interesting for me is Champ a little bit, is that Nicky Henderson's been going on about this race all season long for him. We haven't seen him since Christmas behind Paisley Park, obviously in that rearranged event. And I think the fact that he stayed fresh and he hasn't been to Cheltenham like a number of these and had hard races, I could certainly see Champ running a massive race here, even at the age of 11. We saw at the Stayers Hurdle that the pensioners like me and you, they can still strut their stuff when they need to. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Champ on better ground, on a flat track. I know he was beaten 20 odd lengths in this race last year, but I think he's fresher than most, and that might count for a lot this week.
Well, speaking of pensioners, I mean, Sire de Belay,
Yeah, exactly.
Race, and obviously off the back of what happened at Cheltenham, he must have a big chance as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he won the race well last year, and he ground his way to victory in this last year, didn't he? I mean, he's just a phenomenal racehorse.
All right. Before we get to the Nationals, is there anything else you want to mention running over the week at Aintree that is worthy of a mention?
Yeah, just a little talk on the Topham, perhaps. I thought Ashtown Lad was an interesting contender there. Obviously won the Beecher and looked as though he was just coming to the end of his tether there. So I don't think this drop back in trip will be too much of a concern for him, really. I know his owner would love to run probably in the Grand National, but I'm just not sure the horse would ever get that trip. Not necessarily in a horse box, to be honest. But I think he's obviously been very cleverly campaigned. He's run a couple of times over hurdles. They've saved his mark for this. I think he's the kind of horse that I could see running really well. I think he's a very fair price as well. So 10-1 with Bet365. We know how good a target trainer Dan Skelton is. And I think that, Ashtown Lad and Jess Keel are probably the two to concentrate on the top. And they look the class horses with good course form.
All right. And we come to the National, Sam.
Yeah.
I'll ask you for your first 4 home.
First 4 home. Right. Well, I think I'm not sure which order they'll be in yet. I just want to have a look at the ground first. So I'll just put that little caveat in if I can, Rish. Corach Rambler, I think he's got everything. He's got the engine. I've seen 1 or 2 people question whether he'll stay. I'd be amazed if he didn't, if I'm honest. I mean, people saying, he faded a little bit in that Coral Trophy at Newbury. was an incredible performance to even get into contention. That is my only slight concern about him, is that he's a one for Arthur type horse, isn't he? He's got to come from a long way back. There's probably him, there's probably Noble Yates, these horses that do have to come from a long way back. And that is always a little bit of a concern for me in the National, given the pace they go and the way they get into a rhythm up top. I think Noble Yates, I thought his Gold Cup run was astonishing. If that hasn't left a mark, I think he has to be there and thereabouts again. He's bucked the trend with a number of Grand National winners in that he's actually improved this year rather than going backwards. So I know he's got 11-11 and people say, well, he can't carry that weight, but you know, he won so well last year. I think he's got to be there and thereabouts. I think Mr. Incredible will make it into my 4 as well. I've got a slight concern about him as well, the fact that he's going to come from a long way back, and he has got 2 ways of running, obviously, but he travelled so well through the Cheltenham handicap, and I thought if Patrick Mullins had wanted to, I thought he could have got very competitive in that a little bit earlier and possibly won it. So I think that was a nice little spin round for him. And then the other one probably would be Lamilos, who, you know, I was very taken with when he won at Newbury early on in the year, and he's had a little spin round at Kelso after the weights came out. He got beaten, but probably wasn't Harry Skelton's finest tactical ride that day, and I don't think they'd be too concerned anyway. He's had a nice spin out and opened the lungs, and a trip to Scotland never does anyone any harm. So I think he'll be on the scene as well.
Yeah, I think Harry sort of said he'd like to have another go at that race again.
Yeah.
So that, 2 of those 4 feature in my first 4, Sam. Obviously, Corach Rambler. I know he's the favourite, but that's why all his credentials suggest he's going to run a big race. Fingers crossed. I'm not worried about the trip. I think it's just a question of, I think, luck more than anything else for him. The way he's going to be ridden. If there's a lot of carnage, he's going to have to somehow find his way through that. Lamilos, I also agree. Train for the race. There's no doubt about. I think that he is a horse who probably still has a little squeak of improvement in him as well. So I'm happy to include him. Gaillard du Mesnil, I think, you know, the way he's been brought along this season has been ideal for the race. I'm sure that the trip will suit him. And the last one I'm going to throw in, partly sentimental, but I do like the Big Breakaway, and I think he is one of those horses that will benefit from it being a slightly easier jumping test than it used to be. I think the way that he races over stiffer fences just always has him on the back foot, yet he's run very well, as he did at Chepstow, for example. But I think the Aintree fences might allow him to plug away. So he would make my as well, the Big Breakaway. So we both agree Corach Rambler. We both agree Lamilos. You've gone for Noble Yates, last year's winner, Mr. Incredible. And I've gone for Corach Rambler, Lamilos, Gaillard du Mesnil, and the Big Breakaway. So that, as they say, is that for the moment. Looking ahead to the Grand National, we hope that somewhere along the way between the 6 horses that Sam and I have come up with, found the horse that is going to emerge successful. Very shortly, we'll be hearing from 2 very special guests ahead of the Grand National. But before we get into that particular chat, just to let you know that our main sponsor, Bet365, have an ITV Racing price promise. They'll not be beaten on price of any horse for all UK and Irish races shown live on ITV Racing. That, of course, includes the Grand National itself at 5:15 p.m. on Saturday. Full T's and C's can be found on the website. Well, we are delighted to have former great jockey Peter Scudamore, and of course part of a Grand National winning team along with Lucinda Russell, one for Arthur, all those years ago. Peter, I say all those years ago, not that long ago. Where's Lucinda today? What's she doing?
Well, as you can imagine, getting close to the race, and it's quite a touchy time. She's next door actually at the desk, fielding questions to owners and stuff. So not only have we Corach Rambler, the National, we have other horses as well. And so, look, we're immensely privileged to be involved, but there are more important things in life, but you sometimes have to pinch yourself and convince yourself that that is the case.
Well, do you have to pinch yourself and convince yourself that you've got a live Grand National contender in Corach Rambler? Was you reading the story about how you bought him and what you initially expected from him? You said you were hoping to win a 0 to 100 race with him at some point. Well, you've achieved that.
Yeah, that is the case. In all honesty, I never expected him to reach this level when I bought him. And look, it's funny. So that then takes you on why, what do you look at for when you go to the sales? And I saw a lovely line that Derek Fox said the other day. Perhaps the Grand National winner finds you rather than you find the Grand National horse or the Gold Cup horse. Sometimes I was told very, very wise man called John Harty, who from the Harty family was brilliant. He was a lawyer, rode the Olympics, and won an Irish National. Genius of a man. And he said, you never go to the sales looking for the Gold Cup winner because you'll never find him. He'll find you. So, as I say, I went to the sales looking for a winner, and he's gone on beyond anything I could expect.
Let's focus on just Corach Rambler. We'll talk about some of the other horses you've got running at Aintree. But how's he come out of the race at Cheltenham? And what do you think of the test that awaits him with his characteristics and how much it will suit or not?
Well, right. So he came out of the race very well. He's a funny workhorse. He's a very honest horse. So he only works well if you get everything right with him. His piece of work fortnight ago wasn't what I hoped. And we changed things with him. We brought him back. So we trained in 2 yards. We brought him back to this yard. I mean, he is as sensitive as it to what box he is in does affect him. And I put him in the wrong box at the other yard, and he didn't work very well. He actually gave me a great big bite on my arm. Now, that all sounds stupid and trite, and only people that really love horses, and you can over-sensitize it all. But my son Thomas rang me the other day and said, you read David Ellsworth's book. He says, with Dave, I'm not sure of the story, but as I understand the story, that Desert Orchid was the king of his stable. He put him in the best box, and he didn't want the best box. He wanted the box that he's happiest, and so it's not just stupid. The more I get to train them, the more I get to be with them, the more I respect them and their intelligence. As a test, look, it's a far fairer. I know we've got this thing overhanging us about the animal rights people and stuff. I mean, all I can say to people like that is, look, this horse is living. This horse is, he doesn't want to be stuck in the field. He gets the best care ever. I train him to protect himself. I'm setting him a test. Of course, it's dangerous. One for Arthur died of colic in the stable. They die. It's not, that is beyond my control. But what I can control, and I'm happy to see, is the test that is set Corach is a fair test around Aintree. I cannot guarantee anything. I am not going to shout from the hilltops and say this horse will win the Grand National. Corach has to do it for himself, but he is £10 well in, and Sam there who's with you there is a foreman, and whatever we talk about and how well he is, it's the handicap dictates whether he wins or not, and supposedly he's £10 in, so he has to get a bit of luck in running. Nothing can win without luck in running, and he has to stay the trip.
Sam?
Yeah, I would be less concerned. I mean, if he was 5 in, 7 in, £14 well in, there is a lot of luck. But I think you also got to have the components to be able to cope with that extreme test that Aintree and the Grand National provides. Being engulfed by 40 other or 39 other horses, finding a bit of light, jumping well. You've got to have the engine to get yourself out of trouble, like Corach Rambler's got. You've got to have the temperament, the attitude to win at big festivals like he's done twice. I mean, what he did in the Coral Trophy as well to make up the ground that he made up from the position he was at Newbury early on in the season behind the Milos just shows you again what an engine that horse has got. And it's a slight concern of mine, Scu, that he's going to have to come from quite a long way back. But I also thought the same before, one for Arthur won the National, and he proved me wrong. So every chance Corach Rambler is going to do the same.
Yeah, I quite agree with you. If you're a front runner, for instance, on Thursday we've got a horse called Douglas Dorking, and he's a front runner. I mean, it's what I'm trying to say is it's scissors, rock, paper, isn't it? If you're a front runner and everything takes you on, it's difficult. Corach will hope that they go a right gallop, And then, to me, that's one Arthur, as you mentioned, Sam, one for Arthur did. I watched one for Arthur's Grand National. I've got two sons running the race. I got Thomas on Vion Le Rouge. I got one for Arthur, my second, who I love nearly as much as my son, And then Vion Le Rouge going from Canal Turn second time started to drop back, and Arthur starts to come up there. So that's, I don't have to. There's the template of how to ride the race, and so I don't. If somebody else other than Derek ended up on Corach, you'd say, well, watch Dunwoody on Mini Homer or watch Derek on one for Arthur. So Derek knows how to do it. He's very, very positive about him, Derek.
Excuse me. Sorry, Rich. I was just going to say, how's Derek coping with the build-up, Scoop?
He's had a rough time. He had a horrible fall at Wetherby, and part of the tension is that I've been very, very worried about whether Derek would make it to Aintree, because I know his confidence in the horse and his belief, and I honestly think in many factors there isn't a better jockey riding than Derek, and especially at Aintree. But I think I'm very positive he'll make it now. He's not going to ride Thursday, probably won't ride Friday. He'll ride out here Friday and then be fit and absolutely spot on for the National. He's fitting himself. He's got a sore shoulder. It's all strapped up. He just doesn't want to go and get another injury on it. But I think that, to me, that brings out his belief in Corach. He thinks he's got a great chance.
And do you have a contingency just in case?
Yes, it's not a bad contingency either. Brian Hughes was in here. The champion jockey was in here this morning. He schooled a Hoisineur over fences, and he schooled Corach Rambler over the national fences.
Okay, brilliant. Not a bad substitute if required.
No, exactly. So look, I just because we work on it a little bit. You always think, I love you're a football man, Sam. You love I love the Old Trafford, Alex Ferguson fortress mentality, and I think because we're so far north, we're on the edge of the great wildernesses above us. That we build a fortress mentality, and I think we're very much a team. And it would be very sad if Derek couldn't be continue to be part of it. I really, and I believe he will be. Yeah.
Well, we'll keep cross for Derek Skew, but thank you for that info. I just wanted to touch on something. Obviously, the poignancy of, you mentioned one for Arthur, who we sadly lost recently, that you referred to, but the magic of winning the Grand National and what it would mean to repeat that, having had a taste of it yourself and Lucinda, Derek, the team, and the experience of it, which most people in racing will never ever have a taste of.
There's two ways of three things I can say that. I remember walking up the stands at this last Cheltenham, going for the ultimate handicap, and I think Corach was favourite then. And I thought, what are the chances of him able to come through and do this twice? If he's fourth and fifth, I'm going to be delighted. And I cried because it means so much to you. The commentator said at the top of the hill, Corach Rambler's in a similar position as he was last year. And I thought, no, he's not. He's 20 lengths closer than he was last year. So the second thing is, how do you put it? The more, when you're champion jockey, I've been lucky enough to be champion jockey, and you think, oh, champion jockey, that will solve all your problems. Life will be happy ever after. No, it's not. The more you get, the more you want. Lucinda says it's peak to peak. The more you get, the more you want. So we want it more than ever. I think Arthur's given us a great deal of confidence in ourselves and a belief that we can do it. I'm not saying, that can doing it and will doing it are different things, but I said, we believe, I think, for the training's touch wood, everything, it can all. I can go out now and something's gone wrong, but I think the belief that Arthur gave us, believe that we can compete at a top level, and I think more importantly, it makes the team believe they can perform at a top level. And I think through Lucinda's hard work, and she's I hate to admit it, but she's a very intelligent lady, and she's drawn a fantastic team behind her, and not only is it Derek's belief that he can do it. There's Jamie Duff that is one of our assistants, and you'll see her at the races. She believes. Vicky, who one of the head girls here, everybody believes he can do it, and I think that's infectious.
It is infectious, and we certainly, I think Sam and I have both agreed that we're riding with you and Corach Rambler. I'm very conscious of the time, and there are so many other horses that I want to talk about, but three in particular, and you've already mentioned one of those, Ahoy Senor. How's it been since he fell at Cheltenham, and what do you think of his chances in what looks to be a cracking renewal of the Aintree Bowl?
Well, if you could have... Look, I was very disappointed. Disappointed he fell. I had the owners of Ahoy Senor in this morning. I always got defensive about Ahoy Senor because they're from Scotland. They're small. They can't take on the Irish, and that's just a mentality thing. The great Paul Nicholls and Nicky Henderson's, and I felt that at Cheltenham he had good horses off the bridle and he fell an uncharacteristic mistake, if you like, and he makes terrible mistakes and he stands up from them. But this was, he hardly made a mistake and he just didn't land, and that happens. So I was immensely proud of what he'd done. As I say, there was Gold Cup winners behind him and other very good horses that were struggling at the time. Now he may have gone another stride and that would have been it, but that is not Derek or my belief. He came home. He's, again, when you're talking about the mentality of horses, I wouldn't want to come across him in a bar late at night when he's had a drink, because he'd walk over the top of you, and he was genuinely upset, I felt, if they do get like that. He'd got a slight hematoma on his quarters from the fall, but it had upset him that he had fallen. He knew that he'd let himself down, but he's that Ian Botham type that he's 3 or 4 days later he's back up proud. Said Brian Hughes schooled him this morning, and he jumped as well as I've ever seen him. So we go with hope. Look, I accept, his price reflects his chance. Shishkin, if he gets it together, is very good. Brave Man's Game is possibly a better horse than him on his day. But on our day we have beaten them. And it's funny. I felt in the end that towards his career now that Cheltenham will suit him better than Aintree, but he's been to Aintree 3 times and put up won twice and put up a fair performance when he was third to Noble Yates. So we're not without hope.
Sam, what do you think?
No, I agree. I think he was in a grand rhythm, and like Scu says, he had one or two of them. I wouldn't say they were cooked behind, because Galopin de Champs was still travelling well, Brave Man's Game. But the Noble Yateses of this world were in the process of tailing off at one point, and they went a mother and father of a gallop. Hence, Galopin de Champs was okay to sort of be smuggled into the race and come through with the race-winning manoeuvre. So they went a really good gallop. And if he gets into that sort of rhythm again, he's going to expose 1 or 2 chinks. And do you know what? It might be a blessing in disguise that he didn't get involved in a grueling last 3 or 4 fences. If there is a silver lining to that cloud from Cheltenham, he might have a little bit more in the tank.
I wish he'd had a grueling race at Cheltenham.
Scu, one horse I've been eagerly waiting to ask you about is Douglas Talking, who's due to run on Thursday. Had a wind up. He's had a couple of runs since then. Won 2 small field races. But the jumping in particular at Sandown last time, and I'm touching wood here, was magnificent. What did you make of him?
So the whole story of Douglas, I bought him because he's the same sire as, he's by Dylan Thomas, which is the same sire as Ahoy Senor. I think to most people's eyes, if you stood them up, you couldn't tell the difference between them. And I'm hopeless. I always have to ask the staff what horse they're riding. But with Douglas, he's got 2 white socks, so you can. If I look at his hind legs, I can see it. To start with in his career, I couldn't win over hurdles with him, and I was embarrassed for the owners because he was working so well at home. and I ran him over fences, and he got it right. Then one morning on the gallops, one of my very, very good stable staff said to me, "This horse isn't right." He was worried about his heart, and then we got it tested. His heart was all right, and it's clearly his wind. He goes down to the Cotswolds. A vet called Ben Brain is a genius, and he operated on him. Then he won at Ayr, won with consummate ease with Ayr. It was a good performance. The second horse has won since. And then we went down to Sandown because I didn't really have much choice. You don't really. The race suited. I was very, very frightened of Venetian Williams's horse. And that's actually why I put Patrick Wodge on him. I thought he was not going to beat Venetia's. I put Patrick on and get the 7 so we can get close to him. And he put up a quite excellent performance, as you said. My problem is that with Patrick's 7 and £7, he's gone up a lot in the weights. But he's only got 10-10 tomorrow. They will be taking him on tomorrow. He is clearly a good horse. He just needs to, it'll be interesting to see how he copes being taken on.
Sam, did you see him at Sandown?
Yeah, he just gets into such a good rhythm, this lad, and nicks half a length at every fence. I mean, if he can just get out and dominate and find that rhythm, Scoo, he could be a hard horse to reel in, I think.
Yeah, I mean, things can go wrong. On his homework, he could progress further. Yeah, but no, there's a lot of horses do that. He's a very impressive horse at home. So we go. It's not. We go with hope, and that's all you can ask for.
Ask you about Apple Away as well, who's also in good nick. Scoo. She won a nice little race at Doncaster. She beat a horse of the Skelton. She's a Saint. Is she due to run in the Sefton Novices Hurdle? Is that right on Friday?
Yes. So she will have. Can never remember. Is it at Maximilian of Donald's to beat and the horse of Paul's that won at Cheltenham? But she gets a £7 mare's allowance. The handicapper has put it to 131, so she's now running off 138. Now, Paul's horse for winning at Cheltenham will be a lot higher than that, quite rightly so. But I've always felt that of the novices, we've had a good bunch of novices this season. As a stayer, she doesn't get tired. It reminds me of my riding days of a horse called Sweet Dew. I remember they're not very quick, but they get to the top of the gallops and they go, let's go down and do it again. She, if you rode her slowly up the gallops, she'd get run over. But if you go a good gallop up there 3 times, not many can go with her. I mean, obviously it's a big step up in class, but I'm hopeful for her future over fences as well. So it remembering that Ahoy Senor won this race a few years ago. She's not Ahoy, but she's not bad either.
It'd be remiss of me not to ask about anything else that you might be running at Aintree that you think we need.
No, we've got one balloted out of the bumpers today, Thursday. I find it. I just find it very hard with the BHA analysis. I think, crikey, how do they, because of our handicap mark? I don't understand it, and I also, I don't know how they handicap them, and I know what they say. It's Musselburgh, therefore it's a small race. So, it can't be, and very good, and I think, come on, you've got to. There's good and bad in that. Our horses get well handicapped sometimes, and sometimes you're trying to push on higher. These horses are not getting handicapped high enough markings to get in races. But having said that, we run a horse, something Poitier, in the bumper at. If he gets in again on at the last race, he's been second twice, was beaten by a good horse of Donald's, and then he's won twice. Form's okay, but I like him as well. I mean, I just feel I'm trying to keep your feet on the ground, but I just feel we're sending a different class of horse to these meetings now. So I'm hopeful that they can do themselves justice.
News coming through this recent week's, Scoo, obviously the fact that Tom retired. So I just wanted to get a sort of synopsis from you on what has been a stellar career.
Yes, it's always it's like I always felt like a father on the touchline watching your son play rugby or cricket or something. So I'm not the best person to ask. I found three things. I was relieved he gave up in one piece. At the same time, on the other side of me, I live my life again watching him do it. So that was a difficult side for me. On the middle day, a couple of days at Cheltenham, I suddenly, gosh, I can enjoy Cheltenham. We haven't got a runner again to the Gold Cup, so I Wednesday and Thursday I quite enjoyed. I'm not, because otherwise, everything has to stop. Watch Thomas riding, and say, like watching your son try and not get out for a duck in the school cricket match. And then,
and my dad.
Overall, I'm immensely proud of so many things. The way he conducted himself, his talent riding, and the way he's conducted himself since he's given up. I don't know what his mother must have been a very, very good talker, because his father isn't, and he's very good. And actually, the granddaughters are very good talking as well. So it must have skipped a couple of generations and gone straight to them. Because as you know, Rishi, I stutter and and ah on television.
But you get your rescue, which is the most important thing. It's the most important thing. We know what you're saying. Sam, is there anything else that you wanted to touch on with Skew before we wrap this up? Obviously, there's a big week ahead, and I don't want to keep him too long.
No, absolutely not. And just to wish him well from everyone at Oddschecker and from the podcast, the Racing Weekly podcast. Skew, thank you again for your time. I know it's quite a fraught week, and you're trying to juggle a few different plates as well. At least you've got chances early on in the week to perhaps take your mind off Saturday being a massive day.
Yeah, no, it's I don't know. There must be some sort of film you could do. You can hear behind it when whatever happens. So thank you very much. You'd love to speak to two friends. Thanks very much indeed.
Cheers, Skew.
Skew, thank you so much. Best of luck. Give our regards to Lucinda. Keep our fingers crossed for Derek as well. That has been Peter Scudamore joining us on this episode of Racing Weekly. Sam, thank you very much as well for your company. We wish Peter Skew, Lucinda, Derek, and the team with Corach Rambler the very best of luck in the Grand National on Saturday, Aintree. And thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Racing Weekly, brought to you by oddschecker in association with Bet365. As always, if you like what you've heard or watched in this or any of our previous episodes, then leave us a kind review on Apple Podcasts or in the comments section on YouTube. We'll be back next week to review all of the action that we've seen this week. And Steve Ryder will be in the presenter's chair, and Kate Tracy will be joining the team as well. So thank you very much for watching this episode of Racing Weekly, and we wish Corach Rambler the best of luck in the Grand National.